Following pressure from the National Assembly to assent to the Electoral Act, President Muhammadu Buhari has reportedly sent the document to the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice and the Independent National Electoral Commission for legal advice. It comes days after the Senate passed a bill to allow all statutory delegates to vote in the primary election or convention of political parties. Mr. Fisayo Olusegun, a lawyer, joins us now to discuss the impact of President Muhammadu Buhari's decision on whether or not to assent to the Electoral Act after the amendment of Section 84, subsection 8 of the law, and how this will affect preparations for the 2023 general elections. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to ask you, what's the implication of the President's delay in assenting to Section 84, subsection 8 of the Electoral Act, not just for the APC, but for the remaining 17 political parties?
Okay, there are a myriad of implications, actually. Number one is mandatory timelines that the Electoral Act necessarily carries. So if the president does not give a definitive assent to that bill, it throws everything in chaos. Nobody is able to know what timelines within which to do what, because there are specific timelines before the date of the elections, different things, or for different steps to be taken by the parties, by INEC. And so if that assent is not given, particularly the issue at hand, the Section 84 in question, obviously everybody, the test is whether if that assent is given, is going to reflect or is going to be truly representative, or is just something that can be, influenced by elements, because the ultimate test is that would you allow these delegates who have access to, resources of government, to also be part of, the process. And it's quite a test. So in a way, you want to relate with the hesitation on the part of the president to want to be careful in, reaching out this action, because these people are still in office. And that goes to the root of, the entire electoral process, because they're coming with a lot of influence.
Now, considering the fact that political parties are expected to submit their delegate lists not later than 7 days to the primaries, and they're also expected to submit their candidates by June the 3rd, is it advisable for INEC to extend the deadline for the primaries?
Well, from the look of things, my personal view will be that it's very important that the president gives INEC a very clear feedback on what law to guide what version of the Electoral Act as amended to guide whatever INEC is to, because as you are aware, it's very easy for these matters to end up in court. And whether INEC took the right decisions, whether, the timelines are right, are justified, these are matters that will be tested in court. So my view will be that it will be very, very appropriate and tidy for INEC to have a definitive feedback, from the presidency on what amendment of the Electoral Act is working with, wholesomely. That guides it, that helps it. But because right now the question is, what does INEC do? And if INEC chooses to change the timelines, on what power will he be said to be taking those timelines, when obviously there's an amendment in process, So those are part of the questions. So for me, yes, I agree, it's a test for INEC, but also the burden on them is that this will also be subsequently tested, So the pressure will go back to the president to ensure that, look, this is done on time. A lot hangs on that decision.
But someone would have said that, why wait till now before we start trying to move the goalposts? That we should have probably done this a while ago, that if probably the president needed to amend in the Electoral Act long before now,
yes,
that probably won't find ourselves at this particular junction.
That's actually a good question, because you will recall that this amended process had started way before the last elections, 2018 thereabout, and then the argument was that the timeline was not there anymore to effect it. So if it could not be done then, it should have been done now. So the concern of observers is that, is this another ploy to foist on Nigerians, because whether we like it or not, INEC will be forced to make a decision. They can't just sit on the fence. They will make a decision either to rely on the existing Electoral Act or, they have to make a decision. And that would cause a lot of uncertainty, because the president had demonstrated or has said time and again that he wants to leave an electoral process better, than what he meant. But this hesitation, it's very confusing, I must be honest with you.
Well, what do you think could be responsible for this hesitation and this delay, in actually giving us the electoral acts that will help, give us free, fair, and credible elections in 2023?
Honestly, you recall the tussle on the issue of direct primaries and all that, right? Riding on the back of that is this Section 84, issue on, delegates and whatnot. I understand, again, the hesitation by the president, what decision to make. Because on the one hand, it will make sense for the incumbent party to have a lot of delegates in power, with influence and resources, come to the primaries. We don't know what goes on in the primaries, and the question is, there are also people who are not in government who are equally interested in running for offices and, being part of the process. So the question is, why not create a level playing field? If you know you want to participate, then leave whatever you're doing and focus on that. So I personally believe that if a person in office chooses to want to be part of the electoral process, independence, neutrality demands that they should distance themselves, from it. It's just good practice, So I think that should be ideal. That would be my view.
In your opinion, do you think that, because we're talking about this, some will say that this might just favor not just even the ruling APC right now, but even another dominant party, the PDP. But what are the chances that other parties, other smaller parties have, does the Section 84 subsection 8 favor them as such, or does it put them at a disadvantage?
Well, for me, I think it's a play around incumbency. Who has access to the power and the resources? That's the question. Because you're in office, and at the same time, you want to take active role in what should be an independent and neutral process. So the thinking is that you should distance yourself a bit so everybody can have a fair playing ground. Like you said, the smaller parties, whatever they are, APC is the biggest of them, is the incumbent right now, then PDP. But there's a lot of other smaller ones who obviously are not in office. And trust me, the electoral process in Nigeria is not cheap. So they don't have access to what you have access to. So where's the fair playing ground? That's the question.
Now, we are hearing reports that some APC governors are lobbying the president not to sign the Electoral Act, that's Section 84, subsection 8, into law, because they want to handpick delegates who will elect the party's presidential candidate. Now, if this happens, can those disenfranchised, can they approach the court, to seek justice?
Absolutely. And that's the part of the caution we're perhaps presenting to the president, that whatever he does, he must do it with a sense of posterity. Every step everybody takes can be contested in court. And the question is, already, how influential governors are. They will not just slip by and allow the process to just go whatever direction they want it to go. So the question, and the retinue of aides and, advisors that they have, federal, state, and all that. Now imagine the influence of all those. And this Nigeria, someone in office is very powerful.
Is this all part of the political process? Some would say,
yes.
But do you think that this is just, like you said, the power of incumbency trying to just maybe do the power grab play?
Well, you see, honestly, for me, I will say that the most credible structure would have been a situation where a party or an incumbent party or a ruling party is given as much opportunity as all the other parties. In other words, a fair playing ground. Because everybody is suspicious right now. What is on? Are they trying to sneak something? Do they have something up their sleeves? And this is Nigeria, you understand. So I think for me is that delegates should stand aside. If you want to be part of the process, then you should be neutral. You should be independent. You don't, on the one hand, you are still in active, office, and at the same time, you want to be part of the electoral process. We should be independent,
Barrister Fisayo Olusegun, thank you so much for joining us on
Thank you.
Newsday.
You're
We
welcome.
appreciate
it's
your
my pleasure
coming.
to be here as well.